Hey everyone, welcome back to another video in the beautiful outdoors. As you can see, it's super green. It's a bit of a cheat because I'm not in Sweden at the moment, but this is the first video I think of the year without gloves. So that is amazing. And yeah, as you can see in the thumbnail, today we're gonna talk about The Hobbit by Tolkien and my experience reading this book and a bit of my discomfort with some of the things that I felt didn't age so well. Now, let's be clear, like, I don't think we need to dispute the historical value that this book has and everything that The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings gave to the fantasy genre. So this video is not to like trash on that or anything, nor is it to, you know, your experience with this story. If you have nostalgia for it, if you read it as a kid, like that's your own, and this is not like a critique on that. I think I am just here to share a bit of my own experience and why I don't think this is a story that has aged so well, and why I wouldn't recommend adults in particular to read this to kids, or yeah, like, as a present for if you have like younger kids in your family, like nieces or or nephews or your own children. Like, I don't think this is that great of a book, and it's not so crazy to think about a book written by a white guy from a long time ago. I mean, this is a classic book. Someone from Europe, like, it's not a shocker that it didn't age as well. But I don't think Tolkien is one of those writers that we like talk about as much in that lens. And at least I feel like no one in BookTube has mentioned any of these things, which was a bit of a shocker to me. I still see people, talking so fondly about the Hobbit, and yeah, I just want to give my own opinion on this book. I can start with some of the positives. I think it was obviously so whimsical and so cozy. I loved that a lot of the fantasy is actually centered around nature. And yes, we have some like non-human races, but we also have just like spiders and eagles and, a bear-ish creature. And so much of the story is about like journeying through the land and seeing how beautiful this world is. So I definitely appreciated that. And I also thought it was quite, comforting that the story follows this like character that lives a very peaceful life and is thrown into this huge epic adventure for like relative to what he's used to, and he is able to make a lot of it, right? And I think that is a powerful message, and one that I think even the Lord of the Rings handles even to a larger extent. So I think those are positives. And another thing that I think actually aged really, really well is the prose. And I was surprised to see how easy it is to read the prose in this story. And again, maybe that's because it's meant to be read by or for kids, to kids. But I thought the language was so beautiful, and I even remember like my favorite scene by far in the story is when Bilbo and the dwarves meet these like trolls. I don't know if that's the exact term for these creatures. It's like three trolls that talk in this like very thick like accent or dialect, and I can almost think about them with like this very like English kind of thick groovy accent, and the prose between like in that encounter and throughout the rest of the story is so lush, but not like complicated, but just like so vibrant and like cozy, and there's like the songs and whatnot. So I don't know, I gotta say that I really liked the prose. So with that out of the way, and again, this is just to go a bit of the things that I didn't like about the story. No one can deny the value that this has had in history for the genre, and like for a lot of people that have found themselves finding strength or finding companionship through these stories. So I don't want to touch any of that. So let's just get into it. The first thing that I didn't like, that I noticed very quickly, was how much Bilbo fat shames this one character. So in the party of dwarves, we have basically like 13 or 14, I don't remember how many dwarves. We have like the leader, we have two like twins, one that is maybe a bit older, and then the fat one. And that is basically all the ones that we get like characteristics of. The rest are kind of just a bit of the same. And something that I did not like how much Bilbo like remarks the fact that this dwarf is fat, and he says this often to make fun of him, or to make fun of a situation because he's fat, or to reiterate how much of a problem it causes like for this journeying party, because he gets like stuck in spaces, or if they need to jump into this barrel, then it's like too tight for him. And there are a ton of people in this group, and if you want to introduce like small complications in the journey, he could have said like how some of the characters are old and maybe they're slow, or how one of the characters trips or something, but it's always remarked how the fat one is like the slow one, or like the thing or the character in the party that almost always introduces some kind of issue to the party. And did not I do not like that. I seen a part of the story where Bilbo is fighting like some spiders that are just in their forest doing their own thing. He remarks again like how like they're so fat and ugly, and it's almost all of the language I feel like around the word fat was negative in this story, and it was so pervasive in the story. And I think it was kind of weird because in the start Bilbo remarks how like many different colors these dwarves are wearing, like in their scarves or like their capes, and even like things in their beards, I think. And I feel like the author could have used any other characteristic to you know make the dwarves a bit more different, or introduce like conflicts. Maybe a scarf gets like stuck somewhere, or maybe someone is carrying like armor and is being slow or gets stuck, but it's always like the fat dwarf. And I feel like that kind of fat shaming, like I don't know when like stories for kids started building like, yeah, like just this concept of like fat bodies being either like joked upon, or like being like a nuisance, or being like a problem. So anyways, it's quite like subtle, uh, but it's all throughout the story, and I did not like it. The second thing that I did not like in the story was, and going back to this moment where Bilbo is fighting some spiders, um, it's a very important piece, or like event for him, in terms of character development, because he is saving or rescuing some of the dwarves from these spiders that have like captured them, and he basically just starts like slaughtering them left and right, with this sword that he got. And he is so like ecstatic, he's happy, he's glad while he's doing this. He even gets like this realization of like, oh, now I am like a hero. Because he now like he killed something like a creature, and it's like a fat spider. um, and this made me think so much about Ocean Vuong and his discourse on like how young boys especially are taught through like a language of violence. And what he means by this is like some of the expressions that are like associated with positive things, or like success or victory, are in have like violent words. So for instance, like, yeah, you're killing it, or similar expressions. Like I he does a much better job at explaining this. But I just felt that it was kind of weird that like in this entire story there has been moments where Bilbo has been like rescuing his companions, or being like really smart about it. And I'm not saying it's the only moment of like character growth, but I feel like, in the other times, even though Bilbo shows like a lot of different skills and a lot of like, characteristics of him as a person, like the one moment where he has this like realization of being like really growing into, I guess, an adult or a man or whatever, is through this scene of violence. And I could not stop thinking about Ocean Vuong, and how, yeah, like even like as very young kids, boys are learning that this is good, right? That this is something that is what you're meant to be doing, or that is like a symbol of victory or power. And yeah, I did not like that. And this is tied to the next one, which is that there are no female characters in the entire story, which is well known for The Lord of the Rings. But not only are there no characters, but there's like, and I was keeping track of this because I started paying attention, and there's a single woman that is mentioned in the entire story, and it's like I think Bilbo says something like, he is the daughter of, or he is the son of this woman, or like she was his mother, or something like that. I don't even think he says like her name, and this to me was insane. Like for an author that is so good at like building a world that feels living and breathing and has so many like different races, and like you see the interaction between some of these species and like the ecosystem. Like, where are all the women? It's insane. It's a really big thing actually, because I think this particular characteristic of the book, along with the next one that I'll talk about, builds, you know, again for like young boys reading this story, uh, it's building this idea that like they are the forefront of the story. Like it's just making women invisible, even though obviously we know they exist in this world. And I thought it was insane how they were never mentioned. Like no one's like mother or sister or daughter or like friend. So, anyways, I thought that like erasure was very, very present, which just makes me feel like it's so clear that this is a story written by like a father to his son, uh, and I think that very like male centered and very like patriarchal kind of view on like what like a young boy should be reading is not good. um, and the last thing that I didn't like, and again this is also part of like the entire story, is that the overarching kind of goal of this book or of this group of characters is to go to a mountain that is right now inhabited by a dragon, which used to be where they had a home, or like it's almost like a castle inside of the mountain. And I thought it was really strange that the whole motivation for going back is always the money. Like there is this treasure that the dwarves accumulated because they were like a very rich nation, and they were like doing mining and trading and stuff. So there's like a lot of money in that castle or like abandoned mountain. And even though, I mean, we know from the story because Thorin, who is like the leader of the dwarves, he mentions that he remembers the layout of this city because he grew up there, or at least he was a kid when he was a kid in this place. And rather than focusing on like the memories of, going back home, or maybe like the stories that his grandma or his grandpa or like people in his community would tell him, like why is the main motivation of this whole journey money? And I think that avarice is, and I'm not saying this is like portrayed as a good thing, because we are shown that this avarice at the end of the day is not good for Thorin. But I'm just like wondering why we couldn't have like a bit of a better excuse or a better motivation to go to this place. And I'm not saying that there needs to be no treasure. Like I think that's maybe a thing of like dwarves in this world. I don't know. But I think, again, this is a story for kids, and I don't know if like the center of this whole journey and like the thing making everything kind of worth it, like what the kid needs to take out of this story is that like, yes, we did it for the money. I mean, that I think is insane. Um, Especially with like how many problems we have in the real world of like people being displaced out of their homelands. Like it's an important topic, and it's so relevant today. And so I think the story could have treated that with a lot more care and a lot of like emotional power, with like they're just going back to their home, like this is where they have been living for a long time, but instead it's tainted by like just the motivation being like, we're just going back to pick up our inheritance. So it kind of gives this feeling of like rich kids whining about their inheritance. um, so yeah, that is basically it. I don't think I need to go like that much more into detail. It's a really short book, and I think these things were present enough throughout the entire story that they became quite problematic to me. And yeah, in conclusion, I just feel like kids these days should be reading things that maybe teach them other things. Like we should not be telling stories of erasure of women or like shaming fat bodies, and that being like the only characteristic of some characters and like something to be made fun of. I don't think like kids should be learning that the most important thing in life is finding your treasure and like going out for like money and glory and like killing being like a sign of like growth or like manhood or success and victory. Like all of these values, and I'm not saying these are the only values that the story is teaching, but I feel like it's so big in the story, and I don't think it's these days should be reading this. And I think I am not a kid, obviously, so I cannot judge how much a kid would enjoy this story. I'm sure it could be maybe entertaining for a kid, but as an adult, I think I can judge if like this story should be consumed by kids, or if I would give this to like someone with children. I don't have any kids. I would definitely not read them this if I had kids, but I just hope with this conversation that I don't know, we can be a bit more critical with the kind of stories that we are, you know, elevating, especially these like older classical children books. I don't think we should be holding up these problematic stories like to that level when there are probably, I'm sure, there needs to be, there are like much better stories for this day and age that are treating, I think, with values and like with emotions and messages that I think are more updated, relevant. Like I don't know, I'm not like I don't know anything about like what kids should be learning, so I feel like I'm not necessarily like the person to talk about this, but these are just like my reflections reading this story. And if you've read this book, let me know if you noticed any of these things, if they also bothered you, or maybe you didn't, and this is kind of like an eye-opener. And if you like this story, I'm very happy for you, and if you want to keep reading it, I think that's great. But yeah, maybe just be aware of these things before you like give this story to kids, for instance. It's my only take, I guess. And yeah, have a great rest of your week and see you on the next one. Bye bye.